are approaching the end game in MLB The Show 22, which means we're gonna have our last bit of content in the game over these next like 2-3 months. So we have to cut our tier list in half. We've got to focus on the cards that'll last into the end game for MLB The Show 22. Let's get into our tier list and go through everything that has changed. First of all, you will see I added an F tier. All I did this for is so we could have more depth in the tier list. We get one more category to add, so I could separate those B, A, S, and S plus tiers a little bit more. In our previous tier list, where I would say S and S plus were really what you were looking for, we're at a point where anyone even in the B tier could be very viable at catcher still, while your A, S, and S plus tiers are really going to be who's currently used. And then your S plus tier are definitely going to be the ones you want to push for the most. These have some attributes or maybe just are some overall better hitters than the rest that I feel like are nearly must use at this current point in the game. As you see with catcher, we had the new 99 Joe Torre, who is stacked on the hitting attributes, and you guys will see it later in the week when I upload a gameplay with him. I think his swing is actually not bad either. He's not someone like a Johnny Bench or Mike Piazza or Jeff Bagwell, who has a universally bad swing, so I can't take anything away from him. Attribute-wise, he's the best overall catcher in the game, but he might not be the option for you. Posada is great, so I love him. Pudge and Napoli are still very good too. And Napoli will especially be acquirable because they added the ER Rewind pack, which means he's going to be a little bit cheaper here. So if you want to try him, now is a good time to do so. Players that had in the S tier before are now down to the A tier. As we're heading towards the end game, we're going to see a lot of really good 99s. They'll likely make their way down to the B, C, D tier and make their way out, because as we head to the end game, there are going to even be some 99s that are outclassed. In terms of first base, this is always a stacked tier list. You guys know how it goes here. First base is so stacked in the overall hitting that we bring, and I really don't value defense that much. So I'm really looking for 100 plus hitting attributes at the bare minimum. Our best of the best are going to really bring more contact and power than the rest. So guys that with lower contact or maybe slightly lower in the power are going to be down in the B tier. And it's not even like they're unusable. Like, they actually aren't bad cards to use. Just that first base is so stacked, I think you should look for better hitters. So as we move to our A, S, and S plus tier, mainly the S and S plus tier I think are going to be the best to use. For many people, they will likely have someone in those two to use. It may be controversial that I have Frank Thomas in the A tier, but judging on his base attributes, he's actually a worse overall hitter than the guys in the S tier because he isn't bringing that much more contact or power than anyone. The only hitter he maybe is closer on the comparison to is like an Jorge Posada, but Posada's a switch hitter. At this current point, base attributes, he's not a top first baseman. However, at parallel 5, he's definitely up to par with your S tier. I would recommend to you to choose Ryan Howard or Albert Pujols mainly as your first base options. Just in terms of their hitting attributes, to bring maxed out power versus both sides. Ryan Howard is 125 versus righties. They're also bringing 100 contact versus left, so he's a lot like that Jim Edmonds in the S tier, but better versus right, so he seems like the must use at first base. But in your S tier, if you want some other options outside of those, if you don't like their swings or want other players to try, definitely try those guys. And as you see right now, I have Joe Torre because of the overall hitting attributes he brings. If you happen to be really good with them, you could definitely get away with playing him at first base here. Probably don't want to play him at first. You probably want to play him at catcher. You know, we are upping the tier list. I should mention it at least. I do have some guys like Billy Williams and Sean Green that are basically maxed out versus righties, but a little weaker versus left. But they're bringing some sort of benefit over the other ones that are that way in the A tier. Like Billy Williams has high enough contact versus left where he's going to be more than viable against the guys like Randy Johnson and so on still. So I like him as a first base option. And Sean Green, even though he's got a lower contact versus left, honestly a similar hitter to like a Willie McCovey, he's got speed and maybe a little better fielding. So if that's something you want, it brings more purpose than someone like a Willie McCovey. Guys like Willie and Helton and so on are definitely more reserved to being bench bats. And same with Jim Thome. In terms of third base, I've always talked about this basically being the most stacked position in the game, and you will definitely see that in these lower tiers. There's a lot of very nice options. I'm treating it almost like a second first base, where I'm definitely prioritizing hitting, but at the very least with third base, there aren't as many super high contact and power hitters here. So there are some guys like Harmon Killebrew I move up one tier here in terms of third base because he is bringing out max power, which does bring some sort of value with in comparison to our other top third basemen who aren't bringing that max power. As you see, our S and S plus tier are certainly really stacked, high contact and high power and solid enough defense. If you want a lefty, go for Eddie Matthews or Corey Seager there. If you don't want to play Corey Seager at short or second. If you're looking for righties, Sheffield seems like the guy to play at third. It's probably his best position too because of his lackluster fielding. And if you do have other outfielders you like, you could play them there. There's still good ones to use like Donaldson and Edgar and so on that are good in the S tier. Honestly, part of me wants to even put Edgar Martinez in the S plus tier, but he's basically just like a righty George Brett, so I'll keep him in the S tier. Now we move to the middle infield with shortstop, and you'll already notice that it has not nearly as much depth as first and third base. There's so many good hitters, also so many people that can play first and third base. I think the middle infield is definitely that position where, again, you want to value contact and speed because it isn't as much of a deep position. So as you'll see as I work my way up, I mean, there really aren't that many players to use here in the middle infield. You'll see there are a lot of higher contact options. Having power at this position is definitely very valuable. So while some people may think, you know, Honus Wagner does look like a top tier shortstop with maxed out contact and 90 plus power, 99 speed, and diamond defense, I think he's definitely a top option. But judging Barry Larkin and Corey Seager and J-Roll, they're just going to be better overall hitters. And especially when they're bringing like good power at a power premium position, apparently, where there aren't many. So I think they're definitely the ones to go for in terms of primary shortstops. However, Honus is definitely good and definitely will play above some of that power if you do happen to like his swing. Ernie and Trammell and Rhino are also very solid in terms of shortstops. But everyone in the A tier is sacrificing something. Like Ernie doesn't have much real speed at all. It isn't that stacked on the hitting in comparison to our S plus tier. Then guys like Trammell and Sandberg don't have as much power, but bring a little bit more than the B tier. And Chipper is just going to be a horrid defender, but you're getting the switch hitting. I would really think, though, Jimmy Rollins is still my number one. And the beauty is if you have J-Roll, you can slide a Corey Seager at second or third if you eventually get him the BR program. He's always a really fun one to use. In terms of second base, you're going to see some similarities here. Definitely positioned with a lot of high contact, high speed. So for many players, this would likely be the avenue you would get it in. But as you work our way up, anyone in the B tier is definitely still very viable at the current point in the game. But once you get to the top of the top, it just really seems like second base is the perfect spot for guys that aren't even primary second basemen. Hank Aaron, Corey Seager just bring so good overall hitting in comparison to our S, A, and B tier players. Yeah, you're not getting that much speed out of Seager, but you're getting a nice power lefty bat that's going to be one of the best hitters in the game. And you're getting Hank Aaron, who is very viable in many positions. So this might be the position where you try to play one of those two because it's very weak. I love Cano still. I do like Honus Wagner. He definitely is very, very viable at second base as well since there aren't many options. But just in general, it's just like there's a lot of good, but not a lot of great at second. So as we're working into the end game here, we'll have to keep an eye out on like finest shortstops or postseason cards that we get with secondaries at second. They're going to really keep this position up to par with other ones. So a lot of players are viable here, but there isn't anyone that's super easy to get. It's super impressive. So always be open to try new players here. Now we move to the outfield. And you guys know, outfield is always super stacked. I always want to mention to people, there's always a preference in the balance of your three outfielders. Me, I like to have at least one really big power bat in left or right field, get them in left and right, and give them enough defense where I could get away with using them. And then I go for like a high speed, big defensive center fielder whenever I can get it to pair with them. You may want a more well-rounded outfield, good hitting overall, but good defense as well. It comes down to finding a trio that you like the most. In terms of outfielders, what I'm rating them on, I'm looking for a mix of good hitting and really good defense for this current point in the game. Again, I am judging Hall of Fame ranked season, so I'm looking for ideally 100 plus contact. Don't have that level of contact, it's tough to really use you in Hall of Fame, especially as pitching is getting better and better. So you see, as you work our way up to the B tier will likely be some of your more viable outfielders still. But they're just not bringing enough power, maybe not enough contact really to warrant such a hitter-first card, or these aren't bringing enough hitting with not as good defense. So a lot of good outfielders to use, but these will likely be your third outfielders. In the A tier, I think that's who you should really be targeting for your third, second outfielders if you don't have every card in the game, because you have stacked hitting and then good enough defense to pair with it. Like Billy Williams mashes righties and is good versus left, but is bringing gold defense. Got guys like Larry Walker that are great versus right with gold defense as well. We've got guys like Julio Rodriguez, who's pretty good versus both sides, but brings up speed to make up for some of the defense. This is the tier where you have well-rounded, solid hitters that aren't super good in anything, you know? Pretty good all around and likely will make up a lot of outfields. And then your S and S plus tier feel like the must-use players. Like at this current point in the game, from what I've used, they feel super viable, especially on Hall of Fame. Guys like Jim Edmonds is a lot like Juan Soto hitting-wise, but he's bringing diamond defense. So you're not going to have the bad defensive problems of Soto. Also, if you're rocking solid fielding corner outfielders, you could rock Edmonds in center, no problem. You got guys like Hannes, who are great center fielders who's bringing very solid hitting, but great speed and defense for center field. So if you don't have a McCutchen, for example, he's a great play in center field. Same with Hank Aaron as well. Gary Sheffield feels like a must-use in the corner outfield because he's got enough speed and enough fielding to warrant the basically best in the game hitting attributes he brings. And Andrew McCutchen is still like the go-to guy in center with his mix of contact, speed, and defense. I like that outfield of Sheffield, McCutchen, and Hank. I'm trying guys like Jim Edmonds. Ralph Kiner's getting some reps as well for like that big power bat. I think everyone in that A and S plus tier are going to be very good outfielders to use. I can't believe I'm saying that Ralph Kiner is this good of an outfielder, but here we are. I will speak from experience. He's valid. And now we're going to have some fun. Starting pitching got cut in half as well. And as you see in our F tier, these pitchers aren't even like that bad. You know, they bring solid pitches and were viable pitchers for maybe some point in the game where this came out a little late in monthly awards, but just kind of are starting to get outclassed on attributes. I'm really starting to take a focus on attributes that players bring. You need a certain level of hits per nine to compete with these hitters that are bringing like 110 plus hitting attributes. So a lot of the players in the lower tiers don't have enough attributes or maybe aren't good enough on the pitch mix. You know, guys in the C tier have a common theme of having solid stuff, but not having the hits per nine to be super dominant in Hall of Fame. Stacked teams will probably out-hit those players no matter what. And as we move our way to the S plus A tiers, I have more separation. Our S tier is basically cut in half now because of the separation with the new tiers. And I think this is probably the way to go because a lot of players in the A tier are good starters to use, but just aren't really dominant enough to be a top tier starter. Like, you're gonna be able to use them for a little bit longer. As we head to the end game, we're starting to get a bunch of other starters from featured programs. Definitely in the postseason, you'll see some nice starting pitching and finest cards that we get at the very end of the year from this current season. Those A tier guys will definitely get outclassed a little bit as we head into our end game here. I do have Randy in the S plus tier. I think this will likely change very, very soon, that Randy becomes an S tier. If I try Corey Kluber and he's that guy, I might argue he's a better pitcher to use than Randy Johnson. And before you freak out, if they are, you know, Randy's the best pitcher in the game, most dominant pitcher we've ever had. Base attribute Randy Johnson at this current point in the game doesn't even have more than like 110 hits per nine. Those pitchers in the S tier, on average, better hits per nine. If they aren't, they've got better control. So we're starting to get to that point where, you know, some of the pitchers are going to be just as good attribute-wise, if not better, than 99 Randy. So he's not going to be dominant for that much longer, especially since people have faced him so many times this year. So you may want to start considering taking him out of your rotation, looking for other options if you have a super god squad. I mean, he's still very good to use. We're coming out with cards next month, especially. He's not going to be as dominant as he used to be, as hitting is getting as good as it is. So while a lot of pitching comes down to being good with stuff and inducing swings and misses and so on, hits per nine is valuable to reduce that opponent's PCI size, inducing more swings and misses, getting some less foul balls. And at the very least, if you're getting small PCIs, you know, those fringe PCI swings that could be home runs on some swings, end up being like lazy fly balls for some because you're hitting different parts of the PCI. So keep an eye out on Randy Johnson. He might get the cut from that S plus here for the first time all year in maybe even a week's time. And finally, we head to our relievers. Having tried some more relievers and starting to get more and more, this will get more stacked, especially as we get like finest and so on in postseason cards, because these will likely bring a lot of like 95 plus relievers. with hopefully some good pitch mixes. And as you see, your F tier actually could have some relievers that could be solid to use in the back end of your bullpen still, but we're starting to get plenty of other reliever options. I would really recommend probably C tier and above at the very least. My bullpen has all basically A tier and above at this current point. So for me, I think Mariano is the guy in terms of the bullpen. Great attributes, sinker, cutter. I just think he's going to be the pitcher to use. Guys like Chapman and Billy Wagner have some good velocity and stuff, but I found have been a little bit more hittable than I expected. And guys like Raleigh and Hoffman are solid righties, but again, as we're working towards the end game here and people start to see Raleigh more and more, might start to get outclassed. Look for a reliever to try Bruce Sutter. I've tried him, and I think he's actually been pretty fun. His splitter actually might be one of the best pitches in the game. So guys in the A tier are definitely solid uses in the bullpen, but probably aren't your like go-to relievers in close games unless you really don't have many options. This is what I would call my current best team. For me, I think I'm only keeping in Posada so I could get a non-righty in the lineup, get a switch hitter, and he has been good for me. But honestly, I think I'm going to start Joe Torre here very soon. Ideally, I get Corey Seager, and I'll probably play him at second base over Cano. I love myself Robbie Cano, but just lacking in that power versus righties and a little bit in the contact versus left, especially in comparison to Seager. I want to find a way to get Jim Edmonds in this lineup because I think Jim is actually really sick. As you guys will see in some of my gameplays I upload this week, I'm going to be trying a bunch of these cards some more, and this team is going to have some shuffling, especially in the lineup here. And then in the pitching side of things, I did take out Randy, not because I don't think he's top 5 worthy. I just want to try to really look for other pitchers and see how they do. So I've tried Cueto. I'm going to keep on using Glavine, Lee, and AJ Burnett. I'm just going to keep on shuffling through the top 5 rotation here as we're getting more and more pitchers. I just don't want to keep Randy in as a crutch. Same with Nolan Ryan, because I've been using them for a bit. So yeah, I know it was a chaotic tier list, and we talked a lot more because we had some big changes. Especially as we're heading into October here, we're getting a bunch of content. We're getting to the end game. You'll start to see a lot of differentiation from one tier of 99 to another. In years past, I used to say there were like 2 different tiers of 99s. This year, it's like we have 3 tiers of 99. So you have like your guys like Yadier Molina, Johnny Bench, who are lower tier. Then your mid-tier guys like Posada and Cartaya and so on. But we're getting some super endgame type guys like Joe Torre who are bringing incredible hitting to the mix. So keep your eyes out on changing players, especially as we're getting more and more hitters in the lineup this month. Want to keep an eye out on your rotation and trying new players. Always be open to trying new players, especially if you're really trying to make the best team. I would love to hear your thoughts on this tier list. I know it was chaos and there's a lot of change. I'll be uploading a ton of gameplays with the cards like Eddie Matthews, Joe Torre, and so on this week. Make sure you are subbed to the channel down below to see those. I'll be elaborating on my thoughts on those cards, those videos as well. And I'll be streaming a ton before I head out to TwitchCon here on Thursday. So you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you then. Deuces.